We got barbecue back here. You're all invited. Welcome to the Sloopcast. How are you doing today, Kyle?
Doing all right, Jared. Doing all right. How are you doing today?
As I look at the screen, as I look at OBS over here, which does our screen recording, I realize I'm very hard to see in this black sweater. I kind of look like a floating head.
At least just this part of it here, Jared. Not your whole face, just from like cheekbone up to forehead.
I need more light. But I'm not going to fix that now because we're already recording and I don't like to edit the video ever. So we roll. I'm a floating head this episode. That's just how things are going to be. Kyle, we have a very busy episode. Let's not goof around.
We are Jared now. We are now, Jared, in postseason form here. We're into our silly season mode.
Silly season. It's the first silly season in months.
I know. So what do we got in our first silly season of the 2024 year?
Silly season, if you don't know, silly season is kind of that stuff that happens right after the season. It has to do with coaching changes, personnel changes. Not just that, but those are the two examples coming to my mind because that's what we're talking about today. So that falls firmly into silly season. And that's what we're talking about. There have been some coaching changes, Kyle.
Yeah, just a few.
Well, you just 4 so far. We have 3 coaches out. We have 1 coach in. And let's talk about the one coach out. Perry Eliano, safety coach, is out. He has been replaced by Matt Guerrieri. Guerrieri is coached for Jim Knowles before. He coached for Knowles for 6 years at Duke. 3 of those as a graduate assistant, and then 3 of those as the co-defensive coordinator. Kyle, he became the co-defensive coordinator under Knowles at Duke at 26 years old. 26 years old, he became a defensive coordinator.
He's younger than us, Jared.
Oh, much.
Not by much, but yeah.
Let's see. He after Knowles left for Oklahoma State, Guerrieri was then the co-defensive coordinator at Duke for 3 years at Duke. So he's what? 29? Becomes a co-defensive coordinator. Then the entire Duke staff got let go when David Cutcliffe was let go. And that coincided with Knowles leaving Oklahoma State to Ohio State. So then he was a graduate assistant or a quality control coach is probably the better way of saying that, at Ohio State for 1 year. Then Indiana poached him. He became the co-defensive coordinator and safety coach at Indiana for 1 year. And I believe Indiana just torched their staff as well. So now Jim Knowles really wanted him back, so they made some room for him, and he's back. Kyle, I think this is a young, up-and-coming guy. Could see him be... I don't know if he's going to be a co-DC at Ohio State or not. I've not seen that he is, so until I've seen that, I'm going to assume he's not. But he could be, and, depending upon how long Knowles sticks around, this could be a guy who ends up taking over the defense one day.
Possibly, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Who else have we got out? Who's the other other coach that's out?
We've been anticipating, borderline asking for this one for a while. Parker Fleming, the special teams coordinator, is gone. Ohio State had a dedicated special teams coordinator, which in the world of college football, where you only have 11 official coaching staff, dedicating someone specifically to special teams is rare. And if you're going to do that, your special teams should be special. They should be excellent. And Ohio State special teams was there. It was there. Nothing spectacular. Nothing horrid.
Just the punter and kicker. That was it.
But that's often up to the individual punters and kickers who are good, not necessarily the coordination of the special teams. He already has a PhD in the Knowles system. Feel like that would be critical, especially after 2024, when there'll be a large roster turnover. Yeah, we'll talk about the roster. We're doing 2 episodes this week, so look out for the Tuesday episode as well. We're going to talk about the roster in the Tuesday episode, so we'll get around to that. We're talking coaches on this one. So Kyle, apparently the plan with Parker Fleming is to replace him with a defensive coaching staff member. It's been a thing that many people in the Ohio State beat, including Kyle and I, but certainly not limited to Kyle and I, have talked about that there were too many damn offensive coaches and not enough damn defensive coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's certain coaches that are getting up there in age there, and I need to start thinking about their replacement, or trying to find someone who can slowly get out at Ohio State and into retirement, but yet not lose anything that's already there on the defensive side. So I think that's what Ohio State should be doing, and most likely probably will be doing here.
I don't know if I'm going to say most likely. I think we've heard 2 separate rumors about what's going to happen with Fleming's going to be replaced with a defensive coach. That feels like that's a certainty. Now, the 2 conflicting rumors that we are hearing, and maybe it just depends upon who Ohio State can find for a potential second defensive line coach, which is what Kyle was alluding to. Ohio State bringing in a second defensive line coach. That's one of the rumors that's out there, to sort of transition Larry Johnson out of Ohio State, as he is getting very up there in age. The other rumor, however, is James Laurinaitis is currently on staff, and there's a lot of people, including Kyle and I at different points during the season, have advocated to make James Laurinaitis a full-time staff member. I don't have to tell Ohio State fans about James Laurinaitis' credentials, whether at Ohio State or with the Rams. He's already coaching the linebackers, essentially. Technically speaking, Jim Knowles is the linebacker coach, but he's also the defensive coordinator. So a lot of the day-to-day linebacker coaching is being done by James Laurinaitis. However, since he's not a full-time staff member, he can't go out on the road and recruit. And there's other limitations.
But with there being an open slot now with Parker Fleming out, until another
correct
coach has come in, Laurinaitis can now go out and do some recruiting now.
Yeah, it's like a temporary recruiting staff member. Yes. I know some people saw him out recruiting. There are pictures online of him out recruiting. People are like, oh, does that mean he's the linebacker coach now? And no, it doesn't. There's a special provision that says, and by the way, Ohio State's actually down 2 coaches right now. As you know, they have the replacement for Eliano, but they don't have the replacement for either Fleming or Dennis at this time. So bring in James Laurinaitis, let Jim Knowles be strictly the defensive coordinator guy. He doesn't even do a position. He's just the defensive coordinator. Laurinaitis takes over the linebackers. Now you have a linebacker coach, a safety coach, a defensive line coach, and a cornerback coach. And you have a defensive coordinator who is separate from all of those. And that makes a lot of sense. And if that happens, dollars to donuts, it'll be James Laurinaitis. That's what will happen. Now, however, if it's what Kyle was alluding to, and they go out and they get a second defensive line coach, and this rumor's out there that maybe they bring in a defensive line coach. He's the defensive line coach along with Larry Johnson Sr. for a year, and we just take the James Laurinaitis promotion and we delay it a year. That's the other rumor that's out there. I'm not going to swear to you which one I think is true, because I don't know. But we do have some names, and Kyle, I want to spend most of the time talking about the offensive coordinators, because we are going to talk about who the next offensive coordinator is going to be. So I don't want to spend a ton of time, but I do have 3 potential names for a second defensive line coach at Ohio State.
All right, let's hear at it.
Sure. We have Ben Albert. Ben Albert is currently the assistant head coach, special teams coordinator, which Ohio State does need one of those, and defensive line coach at the University of Massachusetts. Why Ben Albert?
A lot of hats there.
Well, when you work at those smaller schools, you don't have a giant roster of GAs and quality control guys, so you end up wearing some more hats. Ben Albert was Noles' defensive line coach at Duke for 2 years. He took over as a co-defensive coordinator along with Ohio State's current safety coach after Noles left. So the 2 co-defensive coordinators at Duke could potentially, that replace Noles, could potentially come to Ohio State in this situation. After he was at Duke for many years, he did eventually leave Duke to take the Massachusetts job, which gave him a promotion in being an assistant head coach. And also UMass is the alma mater. Sometimes when the alma mater calls, you go. So that's Ben Albert. There's he's what you would call a Jim Knowles guy. A couple other names out there, and I don't know. These are some names that are out there. I don't know how sincere these names are. But one of them is Jason Taylor, who, if you recognize that name, it's a common name, but maybe you're thinking, oh, defensive line, maybe that's him. Former Miami Dolphin defensive end, Hall of Famer. He's currently the defensive line coach at the University of Miami. Why would he come to Ohio State? He's a Western PA guy. He played college in Akron. Like, there's some geographic ties there. Writing down Ben Albert for further research. I gave you the bullet points, honestly. Now, so maybe you could entice Jason Taylor to come back up Ohio way. He has been he's very young in his coaching career. He has been very effective at recruiting so far, but the way Miami's throwing NIL money around, or at least promising NIL money around, I don't know how much of that is Jason Taylor versus the NIL money, but Ohio State lost several defensive line recruits to Miami this cycle. So, if you can't beat them, join them. Maybe go hire Jason Taylor. That's all I'm saying. All right, Kyle, one more name. You want to handle this one?
Sure. Freddie Roach. Probably a name anybody who's a diehard college football fan probably heard this name. Freddie Roach. He was the former, I think he's the former now, defensive line coach at Alabama.
We don't know. Nothing official's been said. We don't know. The board could retain him. It's very up in the air right now. Well, we're recording this on Sunday night, releasing it on Monday morning. Who knows what could happen? But at the time we record this, and yes, Kyle, I did Google it before. I did Google it at least this evening. We don't know about Freddie Roach yet. So who was the guy that went to South Carolina, or do you mean USC? I'm not sure who you're asking about. Defensive end. Still not sure who you're talking about. Sorry. So those are 3 options in 2024. Not sure. Drawing a blank. So those are 3 potential names. Freddie Roach is a total wish cast on my part. To be honest, Jason Taylor, there's at least some smoke out there. And Ben Albert feels like it makes sense. The question is, can you draw him away from an assistant head coaching job and the alma mater at Massachusetts? The alma mater might be the sticking point there.
Yeah, according to Chris Lowe, Jared, Alabama is expected to keep Freddie Roach on staff.
Not surprising at all. Also not official, but not surprising. Freddie Roach is like Alabama to his core, to his roots, to his blood.
Yes.
Born and raised in Alabama. He spent most of his coaching career in Alabama. He spent some time at South Alabama. I think he spent some time in some Mississippi schools as well. For him to come up to Ohio does feel odd, but hey, let me play podcast for a second. Okay, Kyle. Corey Dennis, former Ohio State quarterbacks coach, was also not extended. We should say, I don't think any of these guys were fired. I think they all had their contracts expired and they simply weren't renewed. But he's out. He was the quarterbacks coach. What we're hearing is that they would like to replace Corey Dennis with a, quote, experienced offensive coordinator. He wants a guy who will take ownership of the entire offense, including the offensive staff. Call plays.
I think a lot of Buckeye fans was wanting that for a while now.
Yeah, and Ryan Day now accepts that that's what needs to happen. And what I think all of this points to, and Kyle, we're as guilty of this as anybody else, but honestly, I didn't hear anyone else bringing it up either. Everyone in the entire Ohio State sphere, fan sphere, podcast sphere, blogosphere, we all 100% underestimated the importance of Kevin Wilson leaving. We all just Kevin Wilson, an incredibly experienced, incredibly successful offensive coordinator, left to take a head coaching job. And we all just sort of shrugged and said, well, it's Ryan Day's offense. It'll be fine. And Ryan Day, a year without Kevin Wilson, has realized that, no, I need another Kevin Wilson. So I think everybody underestimated the importance of that loss. So you're going to go get a, maybe he was the real OC all along. No. I don't think so. So yeah, Ryan Day wants to be a CEO. He wants to have a defensive coach who's in charge of the defense, including the defensive staff. He wants to have an offensive coach who's in charge of the offense, including the offensive staff, and that those two guys report to him. This is the modern, you hear a lot of people talk about your head coach is a CEO. This is what we are now seeing in modern college football with so much stuff to manage. It has been rumored. I don't know how true the rumor is, but it has been rumored that Ryan Day wants an NFL guy to take over the role. Again, we're going to name some names here for you that are NFL guys, that are not NFL guys. So we'll see how we have some options, some with NFL experience, some without NFL experience. But we have some options. Kyle, do you want to start us off?
Well, sure. Yeah. Toledo head coach Jason Candle. He's an Ohio guy through and through. Like that's all he's been is his whole career was in Ohio. Started off over at Mount Union for a number of years before going over to Toledo in 2009. Became the offensive coordinator in 2012 and then the head coach in 2016. I think this could be a huge win if Ohio State could bring him over as the offensive coordinator. But I mean the history's there. He's an Ohio guy, and I think if it makes sense, I think this could be a win. I think this could be a big win.
A home run hire for Ohio State if it happens, but he doesn't have NFL experience. So if that's really an important thing for Ryan Day, then it's a big check in the negative box. And I think there's also the question of he's a successful coach at Toledo. Would he go? And I know it's Toledo, and I know he would make more money at Ohio State, even as a offensive coordinator. Why go from a head coach of your own program to the offensive coordinator, even if it's as big a leap as Toledo to Ohio State? I mean, he's recently been rumored for head coaching jobs at Syracuse, Indiana, Michigan State. He obviously didn't get those jobs, but he was tied to them. So how much of a step backwards, and is it a step backwards, are you willing to take? Maybe, you see it as like maybe I'll never quite get that head coaching job at Toledo or outside of Toledo. If my only experience is Toledo, maybe I need even if it's just just offensive coordinator experience, maybe I need some Power 5 experience. The MAC is falling further and further behind every year. Maybe it's time to move on to a Power 5 job, even if it means giving up the reins. But maybe that's going to be a thing we see moving forward. But for right now, I still find it really hard to see. I don't know. It feels weird. It feels like a weird move to me. But again, like I said, with the MAC falling further behind, maybe that's where we're heading.
Yeah. So if we're going to kind of stick to that same theme, someone who hasn't had a lot of NFL experience, Joe Moorhead from Akron is another name to kind of keep an eye out for. He's had quite a number of years of college experience as an offensive coordinator.
10
years. Yeah. So he's had a lot of experience, but doesn't check that box of what Ryan Day's looking for. And that's that NFL
Allegedly.
experience there. But yeah, I think it would be similar to Jason Candle, though, if Ohio State looks after Joe Moorhead.
Correct. I would say one of the big differences there, I'm not saying that the offensive coordinator, specifically Joe Moorhead, would get $2 million, but it's worth noting, if we're using it as a comparison point, I don't know, does Jason Candle call plays for Toledo? I don't know if he currently does, but he was the offensive coordinator there for 4 years before becoming the head coach there. So I don't know if he still does or not, but I'm sure he did at one point. Back to Moorhead, one of the big differences between, we have two MAC head coaches between Jason Candle and Joe Moorhead. One of the big differences, however, is that Moorhead makes $620,000 a year, which, again, like I was starting to say with Jim Knowles makes $1.9 million as the defensive coordinator. And if you're wondering, Jason Candle makes $1.1 million, which is not twice as much as Moorhead, but it's still a significant difference. So maybe, and Moorhead, at his age, maybe isn't looking to become a head coach again. He was already, he might just be happy to sort of, let me also say this, Candle has been a very successful head coach in Toledo. Moorhead has not been an incredibly successful head coach at Akron. So it to me feels a little bit more believable because of the money difference, because of where they are in their careers. Moorhead might just be happy to become a defensive coordinator and be an offensive coordinator and just be an offensive coordinator until he's ready to retire. He's maybe not as ambitious as the younger Campbell, who, like I said, has had his name tied to a bunch of head coaching jobs recently.
All right. Another name, Jared, if we're going to go with somebody who has some NFL experience here.
Yeah.
Darrell Bevell, the Miami passing coordinator. Lots of years experience in the NFL as an offensive coordinator.
14 years.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
including Kyle,
coach.
Including 7 years in Seattle. And we do know that Ryan Day has pulled from the Pete Carroll tree in the past. including the 2014 Super Bowl in Seattle. He was the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and noteworthy too was that he was with Urban Meyer the one year in Jacksonville.
The one half of
the one half
year. And he actually took over as the head coach after Urban was let go. So he's twice been an interim coach in the NFL. One of those times replacing Urban Meyer in Jacksonville. And for what it's worth, his time in Jacksonville was not just shared with Urban Meyer, but also Tim Walton, the current cornerback coach. So there are some connections there. And he is only a passing game coordinator for the Dolphins. So, he can come to Ohio State and be like the head coach of the offense, which is, essentially what's being offered, what Ryan Day is allegedly envisioning for this role. Bevel is an interesting name, especially because he's been with McDaniels recently. I agree. And by the way, shout out to Buckeye Esquire, whose chats I've been reading a lot this episode. He and I were in the Discord server coming up with some of these names. So shout out to Buckeye Esquire for contributing to some of this research.
Yeah. The downside to Bevel, though, Jerry, is that he hasn't really done anything in college.
Right.
This millennia.
No. The last time Bevel coached in college football was in 1999, and that was a wide receiver coach role for Connecticut. So he has been very solidly an NFL guy for basically his entire career. I believe that I think there's a question to be asked does this head coach of the offense, is he expected to recruit? It's called delegating. I'm not sure if you're talking about me or Ryan Day or both. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. We'll see. How far does Ryan Day want to take the NFL guy thing if he is dead set on the quote unquote NFL guy thing?
Mm-hmm.
Kyle, here's another name with basically no NFL experience.
Talking about Dan Mullen. That's an interesting name. That's a name that
it's a cachet name.
That is a yes. He was the offensive coordinator under Urban Meyer at Florida, head coach at Mississippi State and at Florida. A lot strong ties with Ohio State here. But again,
with Urban Meyer.
with Urban Meyer. Again, like, it doesn't check the box for NFL experience, but it's definitely an interesting name, Jared. So why did you write this one down?
This is a name that's out there. This one's not purely my digging. This is a name that's out there that's been tied to the job. I mean, he's worked with Alex Smith at Utah. He was the quarterback coach. He is a quarterback coach, which I think is probably preferential. If we're looking for someone, an offensive coordinator with position experience, maybe preferentially it would be the quarterback coach. Worked with Alex Smith, Tim Tebow, Dak Prescott, good lineage of converting or of, developing excellent college football quarterbacks. I think he is a home run hire for Ohio State, like top to bottom, a home run hire for Ohio State. I think anyone would be happy to have Dan Mullen as their offensive coordinator. So the case against here. Day is rumored to be looking for a guy with NFL experience. Dan Mullen's not that guy, if that's something Ryan Day is actually all that interested in. And we have to, at a certain point, ask how much do ties to Urban Meyer still matter? Urban's been gone for a while. I think he's probably still holds some sort of position at Ohio State. But again, like, we have to ask the question, do quote unquote Urban Meyer ties still matter? Or how much do they matter at this point? He's been in the SEC since 2005. Does he want to coach in Ohio? I'm sure whatever he'd be asking for, a cachet name is expensive. And like, I know he's like, oh, we're Ohio State, dump truck full of money, yada, yada, yada. I get it, but the coaches still have budgets. You're already paying your defensive coordinator $1.9 million a season. You know, I'm sure there is a number that Dan Mullen can ask for that they would be forced to say no to. He's in TV. He's been in TV for the last 2 years. He might be perfectly happy in TV. You might not leave TV except for a head coaching role. I don't know. And honestly, I just have a very strong feeling that just says this isn't going to happen. And I don't even necessarily like all the reasons I just gave you or me trying to justify that feeling, but I mostly just come back to a feeling that I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. Looking at some other names here, Jared, that kind of really stand out to me here. Joe Brady, the Buffalo interim offensive coordinator. Joe Brady was the passing coordinator at LSU during that 2019 year. He's currently
Mike's is excited.
He was over at Carolina for a couple years.
Zach is excited.
Yes.
You just ignore me and keep reading, Kyle.
He was the offensive coordinator over at Carolina for a couple years, which that was not a good offense. Not a good offense at all.
The Matt Rule experiment in Carolina did not go well. We've not seen a college guy goes to the NFL experiment turn out well in a very long time.
Yeah. So there's, I don't know. I'm not feeling it as much as a few people in the Discord that's showing here. Just, I don't know. Like I'm just not feeling it with Joe Brady though.
2019 coordinator.
I think he might just be a, hey, I'm just going to stick to the NFL though.
That discussion is out there that he might just be quote unquote an NFL guy now. Like that's his goal is just to remain in the NFL now. And that's Esquire says the OC for the Eagles is intriguing. Well, be patient. He might not want to recruit. That's the thing. Like a lot of guys don't like the recruiting process and want to stay in the NFL. And I have heard that rumor about Joe Brady that he wants to be an NFL guy now. And with the job he just did with and for Buffalo to turn that offense around after he took over as the offensive coordinator mid-season for them this year. If he wants an NFL job, even if it's not at Buffalo, which I think it probably will be, but even if it's not at Buffalo, someone's going to make him an offensive coordinator in the NFL this year. So if that's his preference, I think he'll get it.
Well, the next one Zach was kind of hinting to.
But let me just say this about Joe Brady.
Mm-hmm.
He was the 2019 passing game coordinator for LSU, and that's honest. And for anyone who yes, that LSU offense. It's one of the best offenses, one of the most innovative, incredible offenses I've seen in college football in a very long time. Yes, that is Joe Burrow's offense. That being said, that's also like Joe Burrow is probably your one tie. If you're looking for ties, if you're looking for some sort of like, why would Joe Brady choose Ohio State? Like there's no shared history there. The one closest thing you have to a shared history is Joe Burrow, which is tangential. It's it's a very thin string if you're looking for a connection.
Gotcha. The other NFL coordinator you have on here, Jared, is the Philadelphia offense coordinator, Brian Johnson. So why do you think he would come to Ohio State with him just his first year as an Eagle?
Younger guy. He's one of the few guys, only 36, one of the few guys I see. They might be cleaning house, Spike says. We'll see. Johnson has been a longtime college guy. This year didn't go great for the Eagles offense. Johnson's one of the few guys on this list who I think has both really good experience, both in the NFL and in college. So if you're looking for someone who spans across both, I think he is one of those guys. He was the offensive coordinator at Utah for 2 years. He was the offensive coordinator at Houston and Florida for 1 year each. And he was just the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, he's mostly a college guy who spent some time with the Eagles, one of those years being an offensive coordinator. It makes him an intriguing name, kind of checks a lot of the boxes for what Ryan Day is allegedly looking for. His list of guys coached is impressive, Esquire says. I would say part of the problem in terms of quarterbacks, yes, he is a quarterbacks guy. Now, I will say this. No obvious ties to the coaching staff or to Ohio or to Columbus. If we're looking for, shared DNA in that respect, the closest you're going to get is that Brian Johnson is a Dan Mullen guy and Dan Mullen was an Urban guy, but we already questioned how much does the Urban Meyer connection still matter directly for Dan Mullen, let alone a Dan Mullen disciple. So, it's a connection, but it's a very thin connection. That tush push is pretty devastating to defend. Yeah. How about Joe Philbin? Brian Ferentz. No, Austin. Joe Philbin. No and no, Spike says. I know a lot of people are not going to be super excited for Joe Philbin. He coached Kyle Allen, Derek King at Houston, Felipe Franks, and Kyle Trask, and then Jalen Hurts with the Eagles. Yeah. But no, just so we're clear, I was talking about Brian Johnson there, not Joe Philbin. Joe Philbin, already in Columbus, if that's worth anything to anybody. You can't get more connected to the current staff. He coached Brian Hartline, which is the connection that brought him to Columbus to begin with. I've heard. He is 62 years old, for better or worst. I mean, even if you bring in one of these guys who's 36, 37 years old, if they're a really good offensive coordinator, you're likely to lose them in 2 years to a promotion to a head coaching job, or maybe they go back to the NFL in 2 years anyway. So a lot of people see someone who's 62 and they're like, oh, you might retire soon. But honestly, if your offensive coordinator it's difficult to find like that guy who is old enough to not want a promotion, but young enough that you're not worried about them retiring soon. That's a very difficult, medium to find. So Joe Philbin, 62 years old. He was the Green Bay offensive coordinator for 5 years, including winning a Super Bowl during that time. He was the head coach of the Dolphins for 4 years. Awful. Spike's a Dolphins fan. I'm not asking him to be a head coach in the NFL. I'm asking him to be an offensive coordinator in college football. That's at least 3 rungs lower. Like, I'm not asking him to. If we were talking about the head coaching position, Spikes, I'd be saying no as well. But we're not talking about the head coaching possession. We're talking. I don't want Dan Mullen to be the head coach at Ohio State either. I don't want Joe Moorhead to be the head coach at Ohio State either. It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about offensive coordinator. Case against is that he hasn't held an actual like college staff role, a recruiting type role, since he was the Iowa offensive line coach from 1999 to 2002. And he hasn't been an actual offensive coordinator at any level since 2018. So I also kind of feel like if Ohio State was going to make this move, they would have already made it since he's already in Columbus. Is that I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's also a feeling I get. What is his role now? Offensive quality control, offensive special advisor, something like that. Special consultant to the offensive court. I don't know. Something along those lines.
Now, a name that's been
offensive analyst is what he is. Offensive analyst. It's actually in my notes, apparently.
A name that's been running around a lot this weekend here, Jared, and just depending on if he gets the job from the Chicago Bears, if he doesn't get that, I think Ohio State's going to really, really go after the offensive coordinator out of Kentucky, Liam Cohen. Cohen is another name that Ohio State is really, really looking at.
Yes,
he's been going back and forth with the Rams, back to Kentucky, back to the Rams, back to Kentucky. He was a wide receiver coach, then assistant quarterback coach, then the offensive coordinator at both Kentucky and at the LA Rams as well too. So definitely a name to keep an eye out for this week to see if the Chicago Bears does pick him up, and if not, you put money down that Ohio State. I think it's going to go hard after Liam Cohen.
I don't have him higher on the list because I do expect him to stay in the NFL. But I can say that about a lot of these guys, including offensive coordinator Thomas Brown. Next on the list, he presumably will be on the market after Carolina has cleaned house of their GM and their head coach. Has experience. One of the few guys on this list has experience at both levels as an offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator for Miami under Mark Richt for 3 years. He was the offensive coordinator for the Panthers this year. He was an assistant head coach for the Rams for 2 years. Good mix of experience at both levels. Like a lot of these guys, he doesn't have any obvious ties to Ohio State or the current coaching staff. His background is as a running backs coach and not a quarterbacks coach. I'm not 100% sure how much that matters to Ryan Day, but that's, if he is looking for a quarterbacks coach, that could be a knock against him. And like Brian Johnson, his offensive coordinator experience in the NFL is only 1 year, but unlike Brian Johnson, he does have those 2 assistant head coaching years on top of the 1 offensive coordinator year. Mm-hmm. Another name I hear out there a lot is the current Jacksonville offensive coordinator, Press Taylor. And no. I do not understand why this name is out there. I feel like I have to bring his name up simply because it's been out there so much. It's Press Taylor, the offensive coordinator for Jacksonville. That name is just out there tied to this job a lot. No. Stop it. Jared just scared the shit out of me. Sorry, I was using my dog trainer voice.
Another name that's kind of
I will not say this about anybody else on this list. I will not say this about anybody else on this list. This would be a terrible hire. I think one of the reasons why you see this name on this list is because there are some shared Chip Kelly ties, and I don't care No.
You want to hear another NFL guy that's been floating around Ohio State? I think you're going to get a lot of mixed. I think you're going to get a lot of mixed feelings or mixed reactions. Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, that name's out there. I just don't consider that
exactly.
I think it'd be a good hire for Ohio State. I don't see it. That name's out there. I don't see it. No, it wouldn't, Jared. He'd be a good offensive coordinator for Ohio State. I think you can get guys who are just as good who are cheaper. Buckeye Squire letting it known he's not a fan of Leonard Cohen, which I don't think is his name. That's a country singer, but I know who you meant.
Liam
Cohen.
You're looking for
Leonard Cohen is a country singer from, I believe, either the 50s or the 60s. Well, I don't know. I don't know old country that well. I could be way off on the decade. Couple more names to toss out there. I'm going to go over these ones pretty quickly because I don't think any of them are all that realistic. Kellen Moore, who's the offensive coordinator or was the offensive coordinator for the Chargers. The Chargers did just fire Brandon Staley, the head coach. So I don't know if Kellen Moore is currently still employed by the Chargers or not. He doesn't have any college experience. He's purely an NFL guy. He coached, he was the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys for 4 years, was retained by Mike McCarthy. He was originally hired by Jason Garrett, was retained by Mike McCarthy. No one affiliated with Staley can come near my beautiful team. He's more of a Mike McCarthy guy than he is a Brandon Staley guy. He was only with Brandon Staley for, I think, a single year. Still tainted. Okay, fair enough. Guys, I already said I didn't think Kellen Moore is all that likely. So you can calm down a little, guys. Come on now. Rams offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur spent 4 years as the passing game coordinator in San Francisco, 2 years as the offensive coordinator for the Jets, and became the Rams offensive coordinator in 2013. He does not have college experience worth discussing. No obvious ties to Ohio State or the staff. Seems like an NFL guy. And one last name. I think Esquire brought him up before. This would be an amazing hire, but it's not going to happen. It's going to be an amazing hire, but it's not going to happen. Eric Bieniemy. Be an absolutely amazing home run hire all around. His work with the Chiefs as the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs speaks for itself. Helped build the powerhouse that was the Chiefs over the past few years. A lot of people look at his departure from the Chiefs, because he was not the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs this year, as a potential contributing factor to maybe why the Chiefs didn't look as good offensively this year. He is presumably available because the Washington Commanders is under new ownership and they have they've totally cleared house in Washington, DC. So unless they decide to retain him, we'll see. The case against, he's the solid NFL guy, in my opinion. His name's already being tied all over the NFL to both offensive coordinator jobs and head coaching jobs. I just don't see him as an NFL guy, or excuse me, as a college guy. I see him pretty solidly as an NFL guy at this point. That's a fantasy name. That is a real fantasy name, in my opinion. but I've seen a lot of people bring it up. So I thought this is the exact opposite, in my opinion, of when we're talking about Press Taylor. I think both of those, I only really even bring him up because I see so many people bringing his name up that I felt like I kind of had to include him in the discussion because, again, so many people have brought his name into the conversation. But for totally opposite reasons, I don't see this happening.
Yeah, I don't either. I think he'll stick to staying in the NFL.
Okay. Couple bonus names. Now, I already mentioned at the top, or when we started talking about the offensive coordinators to begin with, already mentioned that the offensive coaching, the new offensive coordinator is going to be given authority to retain or not retain anyone they want on the offensive coaching staff, except potentially Brian Hartline. Of course, if the offensive coordinator, if you gave the offensive coordinator the option to get rid of Brian Hartline and they did get rid of Brian Hartline, that's cause to fire them. In my opinion, that's negligence and you're fired. They should. Are you serious, has he, Kyle? Oh, Kyle just added something to the notes. I'm pissed. But that does. Okay. We'll get there. The new offensive coordinator will allegedly be given full reign to do whatever he wants with the Ohio State offensive coaching staff. So if your name's not Brian Hartline, your job's not necessarily safe. I think is the takeaway there. So if Ohio State were to change up their offensive coaching staff, I want to toss a name out there. Eric Wolford, who is I think we can now safely say, Kyle, former offensive line coach for Alabama. He has 20 years experience as an offensive line coach in the FBS, as well as 2 years of experience as an offensive line coach in the NFL. He was the head coach of Youngstown State for 5 years. He is an Ohio native. He's a Youngstown native. His name is Eric Wolford. And according to what Kyle just said in the notes, he does now officially seem to be available. It's hard to say it. He was the line coach at Kentucky before being at Alabama, where he recruited pretty well considering it was Kentucky. And then, of course, he went to Alabama and he started killing it as a recruiter. But sometimes that's Bama. Sometimes that's not him. Sometimes that's not the coach. Sometimes that's Bama. So, I can sit here and say he successfully recruited Caden Proctor, but how much of that is him and how much of that is Saban is a question worth asking.
But looking at Eric Wolford, look at this year of Alabama, probably the worst offensive line we've seen of Alabama in many, many years.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would want over at Ohio State though?
They went with a younger group. But I think that's a question worth asking. I think it's a question where I think we also saw the offensive line get better as the season went. And, Ohio State does have McLaughlin on the roster now, so they can ask him for his opinion. Hey, what'd you think of Eric Wolford? You have a mole now. He can tell you what he thought, honestly, of Coach Wolford. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out. Ultimately, it'll probably end up being, a lot of times it'll end up being someone that the offensive coordinator has ties to anyway. But, with the Alabama coaching staff in shambles and with Ohio State losing several recruiting battles to the Alabama offensive line room, and I mean several battles, more on that on the Tuesday episode, it was an interesting name to bring up. Mm-hmm. Now, I had a second name here for potential offensive line coach, but Kyle has informed me that he is officially off the market. as we are recording this, I was just going to bring up, and it was a total wish cast. Just going to bring up that maybe one of the best offensive line coaches in all of college football was on the market. Offensive line coach formerly for Washington, but as Kyle informs me now officially with Alabama. God, Alabama just got... How does Alabama lose the best coach in college football history and then turn around and, now they have like maybe the best offensive line coach in college football as a result in the shakeup. Bama getting DeBoer is so annoying. Well, they didn't just get DeBoer. He also brought along his offensive line coach, Scott Huff, who's now officially at Alabama. I was going to bring him up as a guy that Ohio State could potentially go look after, but in my defense, Kyle can back me up on this. It specifically says in the notes, the Huskies won the Joe Moore Award in 2013. Although it seems likely he either remains employed at UW or goes to Alabama. I said it in the notes.
He did.
Guys, I said it in the notes. All of those guys, Kyle, you just put down in the chat are officially going to Alabama.
Yep. That's the current staff as of right now.
Yeah, they did in fact keep Freddie Roach. Keeping Robert Gillespie at Alabama, but for the most part, it looks like a Washington takeover for the Alabama coaching staff. Grub Def going to Alabama. That's what Kyle said.
That's what it appears. Yeah.
Well, that sucks. All right.
It's
Ohio
official.
State can kick the tires for Eric Wolford. Officially. Although, again, that's supposedly the offensive coordinator's job, and we don't have an offensive coordinator yet, so maybe not.
Yep.
Okay, Kyle.
That's a lot of names, Jared. That's a lot of names.
There's a lot of names. We cast a wide net here. We cast such a wide net that I'd be surprised if Ohio State doesn't end up hiring one of these guys for the offensive coordinator job. I think I have my money on Joe Moorhead. I think that's where I'm gonna put my money. Maybe that or Darrell Bevel, the passing game coordinator for the Dolphins. I think those will be my two names, Kyle. Do you have a favorite or two as far as likelihood? Not necessarily who you want, but I don't think the fan base will be happy with the Moorhead news.
No.
Large parts of the fan base are convinced that you're going to get Eric Bieniemy or Joe Brady, when I don't think that those names are all that realistic. Despite the fact we included them in this list, I've included them in this list largely to say that I don't think that they're realistic. You might want to include Dan Mullen in that conversation as well. Home run hires for Ohio State that I don't think are super realistic.
I think to me, of all the names that we've said here, I think the home run hire, even though hasn't had really any college experience in a very long time, I think Bevell. I think Bevell, when Ryan Day's looking for that NFL experience, bringing him to Ohio State, I mean that checks that box over and over.
Well, and he's looking for a head coach of the offense, right? This is allegedly what Ryan Day is looking for, is a head coach of the offense. I think Bevell fits that. And also he's 54. I think 54 is kind of a perfect age. I don't think he's going to he's not going to retire soon. And he might be past the point where he's looking for a head coaching gig. Of course, we said the same thing about Coach Knowles, and then Coach Knowles did interview at Duke this offseason, but he didn't take it, or wasn't offered it at the least. But at 54, you might be able to get an offensive coordinator who will come in, and unlike some of the 36-year-old guys who we mentioned in this list, not leave in 2 years to go take a NFL job or to take a head coaching job. Like, you might get a long-term stable offensive coordinator out of Bevell. I think Bevell would be a good hire because you don't need him to recruit. I think that's an important thing. I think Ryan Day is the quarterback recruiter, always has been. It sure as hell wasn't Corey Dennis. If Corey Dennis was recruiting all the quarterbacks coming to Ohio State, they wouldn't have let him go. Not that anyone is surprised to find out that Ryan Day is actually the recruiter for the quarterback position, but if you needed proof, there's your proof.
Yep.
So yeah, you could bring in Bevell to come in, be the quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator, and not recruit. Kind of in the same way that you're bringing James Laurinaitis maybe as a part of the major staff, because Knowles isn't some great recruiter. And that's why you bring in Laurinaitis to do the recruiting for the linebackers instead. I don't know that the coordinators will be required to be good or great recruiters.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, Jared. I think that is it. I think we can go ahead and call this episode here. Any last words?
No, we're over. Do you have anything in Kyle's corner?
CJ Stroud can ball. CJ Stroud. It only took one half to show his dominance over Cleveland in their opening playoff game here. And yeah,
sorry, Browns fans.
CJ Stroud looking awesome.
Sorry, Browns fans, but CJ Stroud's GOAT. I don't know what to tell you. He's out there recruiting for Ohio State. If it makes you feel any better, if you're both a Browns and a Buckeyes fan, know that CJ Stroud was out there recruiting for Ohio State.
Keep it short and sweet there. Well, I'll just end it right there.
All right. Everyone come join the Discord server where if you liked this like super dense, nerdy version of the Sloopcast, which we don't always do, but this one definitely was. These are a lot of this was born out of a conversation that, again, Buckeye Esquire and I were having in the Discord server this week. Like, as goofy as Kyle and I are in the show, in the server, it's very like detailed and nerdy at times. So if this is the kind of content you like, come join us at the Discord server, discord.thesloopcast.com. Tonight's ending music we brought to you by a Columbus-based band called Of Two Minds. Of Two Minds will be playing at Ace of Cups in Columbus, which is North Campus, Old North Columbus. What do we call that region? It's like North Campus or Old Columbus, Old North Columbus. I forget which. Ace of Cups. You can Google it, guys. Just Google it. Old North, I think, is what they call that area of Columbus. It's on High Street. Ace of Cups. They'll be playing a concert there January 26th. Again, the name of this band is Of Two Minds. So with all that being said, I'd like to encourage everyone. Oh, by the way, sometimes I link to the song in the show notes. I'm linking to the concert page where you can then link and buy tickets. And so I'm linking to bands in town. So if you're interested in go seeing this show, link in the description. So with all that being said, I'd like to encourage everyone to drink local beer, listen to local music, and of course, support your local podcasters. Once again, these are Of Two Minds.